The silence in the command deck was louder than any alarm. Captain Rhodes stood frozen, his eyes locked onto the hollow screens that flickered out one by one. Systems offline, engines dead, life support failing in slow, ticking percentages. Somewhere below, the ship's core gave a low groan like a dying animal. "Report," he ordered, though he already knew the answer. "They shut us down," Lieutenant Brandt whispered, pale and breathless. Just like that. Everything. Control systems, comms, propulsion, gone. We're dead in space, Captain. Rhodes clenched his jaw. The Zorians had done it. After 2 years of playing diplomatic games, pretending humanity had a seat at the table, they'd finally shown their hand. The peace treaties, the joint missions, the technology exchanges, it was all a facade, a leash. And now that humanity had dared to resist, they'd pulled the plug. "Casualties?" Rhodes asked, his voice razor-thin. "None yet. But if we can't get life support back online within 4 hours..." He nodded, already moving. "Tactical, with me. Everyone else, lock down the ship. We find heat, we find air. Whatever's left, we survive on it." Deck after deck, the truth became clearer. The Vanguard, pride of the Earth Defense Fleet, had been reduced to a tomb by a single Zorian override signal. They hadn't fired a single shot. They didn't need to, and Rhodes couldn't shake one thought. They expected us to die quietly. He stood in the dim light of the auxiliary hangar, surrounded by the ship's forgotten parts. Spare drones, scrapped reactors, experimental payloads no one ever got clearance to test. And there, half buried under protective shielding, was something that made his breath catch. "Captain," Brandt said behind him, cautious, "that's not even supposed to be on this ship." Rhodes walked up to it, a black sphere no bigger than a human heart, pulsing faintly with unstable energy. The prototype mass compression warhead. Humanity's final threat, banned before it ever saw a battlefield. One detonation, and a moon-sized object would fold in on itself, crushed into nothingness. "It was an insurance policy," Rhodes said quietly, "in case we ever needed to end a war, fast." "They wanted us to die in orbit," Brandt said. "No debris, no message, just gone." "They wanted a silent extinction," Rhodes agreed. "So let's give them something else." They couldn't move the Vanguard, not with the systems fried. But what they had was time. And a ship full of weapons, engines, fuel lines, reactor cores, all worthless now, but not useless. For the next 6 hours, the crew became scavengers, welders, architects of revenge. Rhodes directed every hand, every brain. The ship was stripped and reassembled from the inside out. They rigged the core to the prototype warhead, linked it to the reactor failsafe, built a trigger system so primitive it couldn't be hacked, a manual crank fuse and a dying man's heartbeat. And when the time came, the message was short. "To the Zorian Council," Rhodes spoke into the last working beacon. "You didn't just disable a ship. You taught us something valuable. You showed us what you fear." He paused. "We don't need fleets. We just need one broken ship and the will to burn." The beacon shot out into deep space. The Vanguard, now a floating bomb, drifted silently toward the Zorian Forward Command Station orbiting Nephra 7. The Zorians, so sure of their superiority, dismissed the signal as static. They didn't even bother to scan the ship until it was too close. By then, it was already over. Space doesn't forgive mistakes. It doesn't whisper comfort when hope dies. It watches, still and vast, as the last breath is stolen from lungs too stubborn to quit. That was what haunted Rhodes as the Vanguard glided silently, like a dead leviathan, toward Nephra 7. He stood in the remains of the command bridge, stripped down to bare walls and cables. The luxury of Federation-grade control consoles had been ripped out to free power lines. Oxygen tanks had been routed into a labyrinth of booster valves and overheating cores. The ship was now a coffin with teeth. Quiet, patient, and starved for vengeance. "Captain?" Brant's voice crackled through the static-choked comm line. "Radiation levels around the forward core are spiking. If we don't reinforce the coolant tubes, they'll rupture," Rhodes finished. "We don't have time." A beat of silence. "Understood, sir." They both knew what it meant. A slow leak, followed by pressure buildup, followed by premature ignition. If they didn't keep the temperature just under catastrophic, the warhead would trigger before reaching orbit. It had to happen after the Zorians saw the Vanguard. It had to send a message. This wasn't just war, it was a broadcast, a declaration in fire and silence. "Tell Gerhardt to rig a manual override on the coolant exchange. Put Torres on the fusion venting." "She's down," Brant said quietly. "Got hit with a backdraft from Reactor 3. Burns over half her body." Rhodes shut his eyes. "Put Delaney on it, and seal off that corridor. We're bleeding time." Each step toward their goal came with a cost. Men and women who had volunteered for Earth's defense were now breathing chemical fumes, crawling through radioactive crawl spaces, and tightening bolts over fusion coils while their skin blistered. And no one asked why. Not one of them questioned it. Because they understood something Rhodes didn't even have to say out loud anymore. This wasn't about survival. It was about making the Zorians remember. The aliens had underestimated humans not because they were weak, but because they were reasonable, too willing to negotiate, too slow to rage. The Zorians didn't fear humanity's weapons. They feared its silence, its patience. And now they were about to witness what that patience had been hiding. Rhodes made his way down to the ship's old medbay, which had been turned into a manual nerve center. Cables hung like vines from the ceiling. Power cells glowed weakly. In the corner, a countdown ticked steadily. 26 hours until core ignition. The estimated time to intercept with the Zorian command hub? 27. Close. Too close. Gerhardt sat hunched over a mess of wiring, sweat dripping into his eyes. He looked up as Rhodes entered, face pale from lack of sleep and radiation fatigue. "You know this isn't going to be clean, right?" he asked. "When it blows, we won't even make dust." Rhodes nodded. "That's the point." Gerhardt's jaw tightened. "You ever wonder if we're doing exactly what they expected, giving them a reason to finish us off completely?" "They already made that decision when they cut our systems," Rhodes said coldly. "This isn't escalation, this is punctuation." He didn't wait for a reply. On the lower decks, more bodies were being carried out. People who'd inhaled chemical fumes while rerouting the thrusters to burn in pulse intervals, designed to mimic distress beacons. The Zorians would see it as a crippled, dying ship begging for mercy. Rhodes made sure that's exactly what they saw. "Do we still have optical projection online?" he asked when he reached the external rig station. "Aye," came the voice of Jensen, the youngest tech specialist on board. "Enough juice to get a 3D hologram rolling. Should we activate it?" "Broadcast it across Zorian open channels. Put a human child in the projection. Dying, alone." Jensen's fingers froze on the keypad. "That's dark." "It's the truth," Rhodes snapped. "That's what they're making. Show them." The transmission went out 5 minutes later. A 10-second loop of a coughing child clutching a torn Earth flag, curled up in a corner of a flickering ship. It ran on repeat across Zorian feeds, bouncing between military satellites and deep space routers. The Zorians debated internally whether it was real or bait. And while they debated, the Vanguard crept closer. 12 hours remained. In the auxiliary bay, Brant was bracing the ignition column, an unstable chain of fusion rods set to cascade at the moment of impact. If the ship was intercepted, the failsafe would prevent disarming. If the Zorions boarded, even a single misstep would trigger a feedback loop. "Brant," Rhodes said, kneeling beside him, "you understand what happens if this doesn't go as planned?" "I've got a wife back on Europa," Brant murmured, tightening a torque seal. "She always said I was stubborn, but if I can buy her another 10 years to see Earth free..." He met Rhodes's eyes. "Then I'm ready." They shook hands, not as captain and subordinate, as brothers in arms. Back in the comms relay, the feed finally blinked green. "Sir," Jensen said breathlessly, "we got a ping from the Zorion outpost. They're sending an envoy ship. Intercept in 4 hours." That was earlier than expected. Rhodes felt the blood drain from his face. "They're going to try to board us," he said flatly. "They think we're salvageable." "We could detonate early," Brant offered. "Right when they dock." "No," Rhodes growled. "We hold. Let them see the ship drift past. Let them see the countdown." He walked back to the bridge, lit only by the low amber glow of backup generators. His hand hovered over the final switch, a manual failover buried under 3 inches of reinforced steel. Once activated, it could not be turned off. "All hands," he said into the internal comms. "This is Captain Rhodes. We've done more than anyone ever thought we could. You've turned a weapon of war into a ghost of fury. Whatever comes next, know this." He paused. "We didn't die begging. We didn't fade away. We chose to go out like this." One by one, the crew responded. Voices thick with exhaustion and pride. Names he'd never remember. Faces twisted by burns and sweat and pure, relentless defiance. At the 22-hour mark, the Zorion envoy reached visual range. A sleek, silver spear of a vessel, bristling with technology 10 generations ahead of Earth's best. It scanned the Vanguard, slowed, and held position just beyond boarding distance. "They're hesitating," Jensen whispered. Rhodes smiled grimly. "Good. Let them." An audio transmission buzzed to life, deep melodic tones with embedded frequency commands designed to lull, manipulate, pacify. "Human vessel," the Zorion voice said. "You are compromised. Surrender your systems for aid. You will be preserved." Rhodes stepped forward, stared into the hollow camera lens, and answered. "Preserve this." And he flipped the final switch. The ship's hull pulsed red. Energy rippled across every bolt, every wire. The warhead core spun up like a screaming god. The Zorions tried to run, tried to cut their feed. Too late. At the 27-hour mark, the Vanguard reached Nephra 7 orbit. The warhead ignited. There was no explosion, just absence. The Zorion command station folded inward like a paper cup in a black hole. Light bent, gravity shattered. The hub, the envoy ship, and everything within 3,000 kilometers ceased to exist in a blink. No sound, no flame, only the void, and the message it carried. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't on the ship. It was out there, in the vacuum, across Zorion space, across intercepted frequencies and diplomatic channels, across the black expanse where their command station used to orbit. For the first time in the history of intergalactic diplomacy, the Zorion High Authority didn't respond. Not a word, not a transmission, nothing. And in that absence, humanity found a rare, bitter kind of power. On the dark side of Jupiter's third moon, a listening post caught the edge of the explosion, a ripple in gravitational patterns that nearly collapsed its orbit. The crew stationed there, barely out of training, thought they'd witnessed the birth of a new star. But when the data arrived at Central Command back on Earth, the truth struck like a hammer. The Vanguard, presumed dead, presumed hijacked, had delivered a payload capable of annihilating a military hub that was said to be invincible. When the decrypted signal was finally patched through, Captain Rhodes' message played on loop across every secure Earth defense channel. "You didn't just disable a ship, you taught us what you fear." It wasn't a declaration of victory. It was a threat, a reminder, the kind of thing you send not to start a war, but to end the idea of one. But Rhodes didn't see any of that. He lay half buried under the wreckage of the auxiliary deck, breathing in the sickly taste of melted circuitry and ammonia. He hadn't expected to survive the blast wave. None of them had. The ship had torn itself apart as designed, the prototype warhead consuming its own casing in the collapse field. And yet, here he was, trapped in the bowels of the broken beast. His comms were dead. His leg shattered. He could feel the bone grinding when he shifted. The air was thin, stale, laced with acid from leaking coolant. Every breath felt like swallowing needles. But he was alive. "Captain Rhodes," a faint voice called out, filtered and distant through some unseen speaker. His heart jumped. "Brant?" he croaked, his throat raw. "Brant, that you? I thought you were vaporized." "Not yet." Rhodes coughed, blood flecking his lips. "What's your status?" "Trapped in Section G. Reinforced plating held. Minimal breach. Oxygen's holding? For now." Rhodes leaned his head back against the scorched wall and exhaled shakily. "What's left of the ship?" "About 20%. Mostly stern section. Core's gone. We're debris." "And the Zorians?" Brant's voice dipped into something colder. "Gone. The station's not even dust. The envoy ship wiped off the grid. We did it, sir." The silence between them hung like a thread pulled too tight. "Yeah," Rhodes said after a moment. "We did." But victory wasn't clean. It never was. Outside their broken vessel, debris floated like ash, chunks of Zorian alloy, twisted in impossible shapes by gravitational collapse, glittered like dying stars. The remnants of their own ship spun alongside it, burned hull fragments, dead wiring, corpses frozen in the exact moment death took them. They hadn't won a battle. They'd started a legend. Back on Earth, the political reaction was immediate and divided. The Council of Planetary Diplomacy condemned the act as unprovoked escalation. Earth's representatives claimed they had no knowledge of the warhead. Defense Minister Karen publicly disavowed Rhodes and the crew, stating that the Vanguard must have been corrupted by rogue AI or internal rebellion. But the people? The people knew better. The footage of Rhodes's broadcast, the hologram of the child, the final words, circulated in underground forums and shadow feeds. Protesters painted his face on buildings, calling him the Revenant. Soldiers began whispering about the Vanguard like it was a ghost ship sent from Earth's own fury. And the Zorians? Still nothing. Not a fleet. Not a message. Not even retaliation. Which made everyone uneasy, because the Zorians never stayed quiet. Inside the remains of the Vanguard, Rhodes and Brant patched together life from garbage. Oxygen converters rigged to backup batteries. Radiator plates used to distill water. They rationed protein paste from sealed emergency rations and took turns rotating through the least exposed compartments. Every hour, they checked for signals. Every day, they prepared for death. On the 6th day, Rhodes woke to Brant pounding on the bulkhead near Section E. "Signal!" Brant shouted. "Repeat, Earth-based signal just bounced off our debris field." Rhodes dragged himself toward the panel, vision blurry. "You sure?" "Positive. Encrypted using E-class protocol. Old school." That meant it wasn't the military. Only one group used that encryption anymore. The Underground Alliance, old rebels, pre-treaty holdouts, the ones who didn't trust diplomacy to protect humanity from alien control. "Patch it through," Rhodes whispered. Brant tapped in a series of manual inputs. A second later, the message came through in static, cracked pulses. Vanguard survivors, this is Helix Station. You are not forgotten. We are coming. ETA. 29 hours? Stay dark, stay alive. Rhodes sat back and laughed, a dry, broken sound that turned into a cough. We made a damn ghost story, and someone believed it. Brant grinned. Yeah. But they're coming. That's all that matters. But Rhodes wasn't smiling for long, because part of him knew what this meant. The war wasn't over. It had just changed. 29 hours later, the rescue ship drifted into the wreckage like a shark through still water. No lights, no pings. Silent and cold. Just as instructed. 2 extraction suits emerged, jetting toward the exposed section of the stern. Rhodes was barely conscious by then, vision clouded with fever and blood loss. He remembered only flashes, the hiss of a decompression chamber, the warmth of oxygen-rich air, voices muffled behind sealed masks. Get him under. He's crashing. Where's the core signature? Did they actually detonate that thing? Shut up and move! He's not dying here. Then, blackness. Rhodes woke up in a makeshift medbay, clean but worn, scratches on the walls, improvised surgical equipment, an IV taped to his arm, monitors that looked 2 decades outdated. But he was breathing, and not in space. Captain, said a voice beside him. He turned. A tall woman stood near the bed, her arms crossed, dark circles under her eyes. She wasn't military, but she wasn't soft either. You're with Helix, he rasped. We are now, she replied. You gave them something they've been waiting for, a reason to fight again. Rhodes stared at the ceiling. You shouldn't have come. Maybe. But you gave us a planet killer, Rhodes. You showed us the Zorions bleed like anyone else. You think we were going to ignore that? Rhodes didn't answer. His leg throbbed under layers of bandages. His body felt like it had aged a decade in a week. I didn't do it for a revolution, he said finally. She smiled without humor. Doesn't matter. You lit the match. Now the fire's ours. He closed his eyes. For a moment, all he could hear was the pulse of his heart, steady and defiant. Somewhere far from there, Earth was watching. So were the stars. And maybe, even the Zorions. But if they were waiting for Earth to beg, they'd be waiting a long time. The walls of Helix Station creaked like an old ship in a storm. It wasn't built for long-term habitation, more like a forgotten outpost patched together from old mining frames and scavenged starship hulls. But in the aftermath of what Rhodes had done, it had become something else. A shrine, a command post, a spark. Rhodes sat in a dim chamber near the core of the station, his wounded leg elevated and bound in a pressure cast. Every time he moved, pain flared like hot wire pulling through bone. He refused the sedatives. Pain was a reminder he was still in the fight. He had too much blood on his hands now to retreat behind a morphine veil. Across from him stood Cora Vale, the woman who had led the Helix extraction. She wasn't a soldier in uniform, but she carried herself like someone who had seen more war than most generals. Her eyes didn't blink much. She had the look of someone who didn't sleep unless she had to. You've been quiet since we got you out, she said. Rhodes met her gaze. Because I'm watching. She arched an eyebrow. Watching what? How fast people are ready to turn me into something I'm not. Cora gave a dry laugh. You mean a symbol? He nodded slowly. You didn't ask for it, but you earned it, she said. You think legends get to choose how they are remembered? I'm not interested in being remembered, Rhodes said. I wanted to send a message. The warhead wasn't vengeance, it was proof. Proof of what? That we're not theirs. That we don't fold because someone yanks a string. That if you back us into a corner, we'll claw our way out with teeth and bone if we have to. Cora leaned back against the wall. You did that. Now they're listening. Earth is a mess. Half the population thinks you're a war criminal. The other half wants your face on currency. I'm not interested in Earth politics. Good, because that's not the fight anymore. That got his attention. Cora activated a dusty hollow projector on the table. A rough star map glowed in the space between them. Dozens of red points blinked across it. Zorian command outposts, patrol sectors, intelligence relay nodes. They didn't retaliate because they're not used to losing, she said. You crippled their pride in front of the galaxy. That hit harder than any warhead ever could. Rhodes stared at the map. And now? Now they're rearming, quietly, pulling ships from outer sectors. You won't see it on the news. The Federation's still pretending it's all diplomacy. But we've seen the patterns. The buildup is real. Prepping for war? Maybe not full invasion, but suppression, sanctions, orbital control. They're going to punish Earth without ever firing a shot. They want to starve us, scare us back into obedience. Rhodes's hands curled into fists. And they're counting on us being afraid, he said. Cora nodded. Which is why we need more than a symbol now. We need a strategy. Rhodes exhaled slowly. How many ships do you have? 5 that can still fly. 2 are half junk. One's been cannibalized so many times it's held together with magnetics and hope. Crew? 65 fighters, a few ex-fleet. The rest? Scavengers, mercs, freelancers. Loyal, but not trained for this kind of war. Rhodes looked at the map again. We don't need numbers. We need precision, tactical disruption. They're big, but they're slow. We bleed them until they either pull back or lash out. And if they lash out, then we show them humanity's real weapon, he said. Survival at any cost. Brant was already moving before Rhodes could stand. The younger officer had been sleeping in a crate of dry rations and diagnostic equipment, refusing to take a bunk until Rhodes could walk. You're not ready, he said, watching Rhodes limp out of the medbay. Doesn't matter. You're bleeding through the wrap. I've bled worse. Brant grabbed a brace and strapped it onto Rhodes's leg. You're a pain in the ass, sir. You still calling me sir after everything we've been through? You blew up a Zorian station with a ship that couldn't fly. You can get called whatever the hell you want. Rhodes almost smiled. Let's get to the hangar. They passed through narrow corridors packed with crates, tools, generators humming like low beasts. Every hallway was alive with people who moved quickly and spoke in hushed tones. These weren't soldiers. They were believers. People who had been ignored by the system and now saw a reason to rise. The hangar bay looked like a graveyard, and a miracle all at once. Ships of every kind, rusted fighters, retrofitted freighters, half-melted cargo hulls turned into gunboats, stood in various states of assembly. Mechanics worked in clouds of steam and sparks. Children ran between toolboxes and gun turrets, carrying parts like messengers of a new rebellion. This is your army? Rhodes asked. Cora was waiting by a turret-mounted scout ship, a grin on her face. You expected a fleet? No, Rhodes said. I expected less. I'm impressed. She walked him toward a slab of star maps welded into the wall like a warboard. First target's not a military one. It's a relay hub. Zorian Node 46, orbiting Rhythex 5. It's a communication spider. Disrupt it, and you delay their fleet coordination by days. How many people there? 200 max. Mostly techs. It's lightly defended. They won't expect sabotage. Rhodes traced the line from Helix Station to Rhythex 5. Then we hit them fast. No warning, no survivors. Cora raised an eyebrow. Cold. They didn't show mercy when they killed half my crew with a remote shutoff. They wanted silence? I'll give them noise. She nodded once. You'll lead? Damn right I will. They called the mission Ghostmark. 3 ships, 12 fighters, One chance to cripple the Zorion relay before their response fleet solidified. As they launched, Rhodes sat in the gunner seat of the Lancer, a rebuilt atmospheric carrier turned into a silent death machine. His leg screamed with every bump in the flight path, but he didn't blink. Pain was a passenger now. The moment they came out of warp near Rhythex 5, the plan kicked in. "Maintain comm silence," Rhodes said. "Visual confirm on the station. Hold position." The station spun slowly like a silver coin on its edge, its defense turrets dormant. It wasn't expecting company. Brant's voice crackled. "We've got a clean vector on the main comms array. What's the order?" "Hit the array, then burn the reactor. We're not here for hostages." Lasers lit the void, striking with surgical precision. The array exploded in a bloom of orange flame. Sirens screamed inside the station, audible through leaked comms. Before they could mount a defense, Rhodes fired the Lancer's railgun. The payload cut through the core like a sword, and a chain reaction followed. The station began to tear open, shuddering as internal pressure buckled the walls. "Status?" Cora demanded over the channel. "Relay's gone," Rhodes said. "We're pulling out. Mark this one a ghost." As they slipped back into warp, Rhodes didn't celebrate. He just watched the fragments of the relay station disappear behind them like ashes in the dark. That was only the beginning, and he knew it. The attack on Rhythex 5 shattered more than just a relay station. It split the fragile balance that held the galaxy in diplomatic deadlock. Within hours of the explosion, encrypted Zorion channels flared to life like wildfire. The High Authority didn't release a statement, didn't ask for talks. But movement across their inner systems confirmed what Rhodes had feared all along. They weren't going to negotiate. They were going to retaliate, but not with fire, with pressure. The Zorions controlled nearly 70% of the galaxy's deep trade lanes. Within 12 hours of Rhythex 5's destruction, they froze Earth's supply routes. Every corporate convoy headed toward Earth or its colonies was rerouted, halted, or dismantled. Shipments of critical tech, foodstuffs, reactor cores, all held in orbit under threat of seizure. Earth's orbital traffic went dark with silence and fear. And still, Earth's governments said nothing. They didn't denounce the Zorions. They didn't defend Rhodes or the Vanguard survivors. Instead, they offered them up like meat to calm the wolf's growl. A joint communication from the United Earth Coalition labeled Rhodes a rogue military actor. The Federation issued a soft-spoken apology for the unauthorized detonation of high-threat ordnance. They promised to investigate Helix Station and asked the Zorions for patience. Patience. As if the Zorions didn't understand exactly what they were doing. Inside the rusted bones of Helix Station, Rhodes read the messages in silence, his jaw locked. Cora stood nearby, arms crossed, lips pressed in a flat line. "They're going to hand us over," she said. Rhodes didn't look at her. "They think if they sell us out, the Zorions will open the trade lines again." "They might," she admitted. "And then what?" Rhodes snapped. "We go back to bowing? Waiting for the next silent kill switch? They already showed us what happens when we behave." Cora said nothing. The room was quiet. Then Brant stepped in, holding a comm pad. "We've got something," he said. "A civilian freighter just broke through Zorion patrol, refused to reroute. They're requesting to dock." Rhodes arched a brow. "They crazy?" "Maybe. Or maybe they've got nowhere else to go." "Bring 'em in," Cora ordered. "But watch the airlocks. If this is a trap, we'll know." The freighter was called Glory Ark, but there was nothing glorious about it. It looked like a flying grave. Burned panels, cracked viewport glass, two of its thrusters leaking coolant like dying lungs. It docked with a shudder that nearly tore Helix's portside clamps loose. When the crew disembarked, they came out slow and cautious. No weapons drawn, No show of strength. Just fear and desperation. A man stepped forward, balding, gaunt, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in a month. His jumpsuit was Earth-made, stitched and patched over a dozen times. "Name's Calder," he said. "We were carrying medical supplies to Mars when they shut us down. Zorion patrols seized our nav core, beat one of my crew half to death, and told us to sit in orbit until we starved." Rhodes looked him up and down. "So why come here?" Calder straightened. "Because I heard the rumors. About the Vanguard. About you." Cora exchanged a glance with Rhodes. "You want to fight?" she asked. "No," Calder said. "But I want to stop being afraid. I've got 9 people on that ship who just want to live without being told when to breathe." Rhodes stepped forward, voice low. "We're not building a resistance. We're building a reckoning. You sure you're not here to beg for mercy when the Zorions come knocking?" Calder didn't blink. "If you're burning bridges, Captain, I'm here to hold the torch." Rhodes almost smiled. Within a week, 5 more ships slipped through the embargo. Some were military defectors. Some were freelancers. One was a scientific expedition that had spent years in deep space and returned to a planet now strangled by alien control. They all came to Helix. And they all brought something: supplies, manpower, knowledge, fire, and rage. Cora called the first meeting in the central chamber of the station, now turned into a war room. Holoprojectors flickered to life. Rhodes stood at the center, a cane in one hand, datapad in the other. "Here's what we know," he began. "Zorion trade hubs run on a centralized control matrix. You hit the nodes, they lose control over their embargo net. You cut their hands before they can squeeze Earth into submission." He pointed to 3 glowing sectors on the map. "These are the next targets. Each one supports at least 6 trade corridors. If we take them, we collapse the net." A grizzled ex-Navy officer raised a hand. "We hit these. They'll declare open war." Rhodes met his gaze. "They already have. They're just polite about it." Cora stepped in. "This isn't a war for planets. It's a war for control. If we make it cost them more than it's worth, they'll back down. We don't fight for glory. We fight for breathing room." Someone else, a young woman with a mechanic's jacket stained in grease, asked, "And what happens when Earth finally decides to send us a message? What if they bomb us to prove loyalty to the Zorions?" Rhodes looked at her and answered without hesitation. "Then we hit Earth, too." The room went dead quiet. "I'm not saying we kill civilians," he added. "I'm saying we make sure no one forgets that the ones dying out here were once their sons, their brothers, their people. If they betray us to save themselves, we make them feel that choice." That was the moment everyone in the room understood what Rhodes had become. Not a martyr, not a hero, but a hammer. The following weeks were fire and metal. The Helix Coalition, barely a fleet, more like a pack of wolves, struck fast and without warning. Node after node fell. Relay beacons detonated. Outposts were stripped of data and rigged to explode. Zorion patrols reported growing panic across outer systems. For every hub they secured, another rebel cell sprang up. Miners on Titan, terraformers on Ares 4, smugglers near the Sable Ridge Belt. The flame was spreading, and Rhodes was at its center. But with every mission, every strike, the toll grew. Brant lost a finger when a reactor shield blew out during sabotage. Calder's ship took a direct hit on their 3rd raid. 2 dead, 3 injured, hull barely holding. Supplies ran thin. Food became rations. Fuel cells were recycled to dangerous levels. Cora pushed through it with a fire that scared even the veterans. But Rhodes saw the lines deepening on her face, the sleep she never took, the way she stared at the names of the dead long after the others had left the memorial logs. She was breaking. So was he. but there was no turning back. One night, after the destruction of Node 19, a sprawling orbital dockyard that lit the night side of a gas giant with its explosion, Rhodes sat alone in the engine room of Helix, staring at a datapad. On it, an old message he hadn't deleted, a video clip. His crew, the original Vanguard team before the shutdown, laughing, playing cards, eating rehydrated eggs and complaining about training drills, faces now buried in vacuum and ash. He watched it 3 times before turning it off. Brant found him there and sat beside him, quiet. "They still matter," Rhodes said without looking at him. "They always will. We're doing this for them, right?" Brant didn't answer for a while. Then, "I think we're doing this for ourselves now." Rhodes nodded slowly. "Good." He stood. "We've got one last node to hit," he said, "and then we strike the heart." Brant looked up, confused. "You mean—" "Yeah," Rhodes said. "We're going to Earth." The silence over Earth was different. Not the silence of space, cold and natural. This silence was crafted, engineered. It was the kind of quiet born from fear and complicity, a world pretending it didn't hear the screams echoing from the stars. When Rhodes' fleet reached the edge of Earth's defensive perimeter, the automated warning system pinged like a heartbeat. They weren't expected. They weren't welcome. "Unknown vessels," came the voice over the intercom, flat and rehearsed. "This is UEC Orbital Command. You are approaching a restricted zone. Identify and reroute immediately." Rhodes didn't respond. He sat in the command seat of the Lancer, gaze locked on the blue marble that once meant home. It looked peaceful from a distance. That was the lie of it. Brant leaned toward him. "What's the plan? You gonna answer them or just cruise past and hope they forget we blew up half the Zorian net?" Rhodes narrowed his eyes. "They don't forget. They pretend. That's worse." Cora's face flickered on the comm screen. She was in the second ship, Ashwake, flanking them in orbit. "We're being scanned," she said. "They know who we are." "Good," Rhodes said. "Then they also know we didn't come to negotiate." The comm pinged again, more urgent this time. "Captain Rhodes, this is General Torin of Earth Defense Command. You are in violation of international orbital law. You are ordered to stand down and submit your vessels to inspection." Brant snorted. "They want to inspect us? What, to see if we're the same traitors they painted on the news feeds?" Rhodes leaned forward, clicked the channel open. "This is Rhodes. No inspection. No reroute. You want to stop us?" "Fire." A pause. Then the voice returned, slightly less sure now. "You would risk war with your own planet?" "You already started it," Rhodes replied. "When you sold us to the Zorians, when you let them strangle us. You think they'll stop with embargoes? They're going to hollow this place out until there's nothing left but obedience." "You've made your point." "No," Rhodes snapped. "I haven't even started." He cut the channel. The next 2 hours passed in tense silence. Earth's orbital defense satellites tracked them, but none fired. The UEC was afraid. Not of the rebels' weapons, but of their message. Rhodes didn't come to destroy Earth. He came to show it what it had become. Inside Helix's mobile data ship, the ghost signal Calder and his team initiated the drop. Encrypted video files, intercepted military orders, captured transmissions between Earth diplomats and Zorian advisors, all spilled into the civilian net. Within 20 minutes, major feeds across every continent went dark. Then they lit up again, only this time, with truth. Every lie Earth had told since the Vanguard was shut down. Every name they'd tried to bury. Every order to let the Zorians correct humanity's resistance, and Rhodes' message. He appeared not as a war hero, but as a man burned and worn, still bearing the wounds of the war no one wanted to acknowledge. They told you we were terrorists, he said, eyes flat and tired. They told you we endangered peace, but peace without freedom is slavery. Peace that requires silence is surrender. He showed footage of the Vanguard after the Zorians cut its systems. Smoke, fire, his crew clawing through the wreckage. He played the final broadcast before they turned the ship into a bomb. They wanted us to die quietly, Rhodes said. We chose to burn instead. And then, the most damning clip. Communications between Earth's diplomats and the Zorians agreeing to hand over rebel leaders in exchange for restored trade. They didn't just betray us, Rhodes said. They betrayed you. And Earth listened. It started with a riot in the Europa Sky Dome, students smashing propaganda screens with solar hammers. Then the miners of Vesta Station walked off duty, refusing to load raw ore into Zorian freighters. Mars colonies began broadcasting pro-Vanguard slogans in orbital graffiti visible from space. And on Earth's surface, marches, fires, tear gas, gunfire. The world didn't erupt. It fractured, slowly, deliberately. Rhodes watched it unfold from orbit, silent. You're breaking everything, Brant said quietly. No, Rhodes answered. Everything was already broken. I'm just showing them the cracks. Cora pinged him from the ash wake. They're sending up a delegation ship. Civilian flagged, white hull, no weapons. Rhodes's eyes narrowed. So they want to talk now. They're scared. Let them be. But he didn't refuse the meeting. The delegation ship docked with the Lancer's mid-hold. A single figure stepped out. Older man, dressed in civilian garb, but wearing the face of bureaucracy like armor. Captain Rhodes, he greeted. I'm Elias Corvin, sent by the UEC. Rhodes stiffened. Don't say my name like you didn't vote to kill me. I didn't vote to kill you, Corvin replied. I voted to protect the planet. From who? Us or the truth? Corvin looked around the rusted interior. This rebellion won't save humanity. Rhodes stepped forward, close enough to smell the sterility clinging to the man's suit. It already has, because people are fighting back. For the first time in decades, they're not begging for permission to survive. Corvin's voice tightened. You detonated a weapon of mass collapse. You killed thousands. You've destabilized our treaties. They weren't treaties. They were chains. And what are you offering instead? Endless war? Rhodes didn't blink. I'm offering something simple. A message that the next time someone tries to erase us, we don't wait for permission to resist. Corvin stared at him for a long moment. What do you want? Rhodes said it without hesitation. Broadcast a formal declaration. Admit what you did, what you allowed. Free the data feeds. Let the people see what's been hidden. And if we don't? Rhodes smiled coldly. We don't need to drop bombs. We'll drop the truth, every day, to every screen, until no one trusts your words again. Corvin swallowed. You'll collapse civilization. No, Rhodes said. I'll force it to evolve. Corvin left without another word, and Rhodes returned to his command seat, because the war hadn't ended. It had only changed its shape. The Earth didn't fall in a day. It cracked first, then buckled, then started bleeding pieces of itself into space. The broadcast Rhodes forced onto the global feeds didn't just expose betrayal, it ignited something deeper, something generations of diplomacy and planetary pride had buried under polished speeches and staged peace talks. It reminded people they'd been passengers in their own story for too long. In New Berlin, military officers laid down arms and joined civilian protests. In Johannesburg, orbital drop units defected and helped rebels disable a satellite relay used for Zorian surveillance. By the time the rebellion reached the lunar colonies, local officials were openly dismantling Earth-aligned comm towers and replacing them with Helix net transmitters. The fire was spreading, but fire, left uncontrolled, consumes everything, even those who start it. Earth's Western Orbital Defense is reassigning assets, Cora said, voice grim over the command channel. They're pulling ships back from Mars and shifting them toward the inner belt. Looks like they're expecting us to press harder. Rhodes sat at the center of the Helix command deck, his injured leg strapped into a mobility harness, eyes locked on a flickering display of Earth's orbital defense array. "They're not bracing for us," he said. "They're bracing for collapse." "They should be," Brant added, stepping into the room with a data slate. "We just confirmed 37 colonies are now flying Helix-linked banners, and 3 Zorian garrisons have been overtaken by their own human auxiliaries." Rhodes didn't respond immediately. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, watching as the icons shifted on the screen. Alliances changing, sides crumbling, and a new symbol rising in the noise. The mark of the Vanguard, a broken ship wrapped in flame. It had started as graffiti on a forgotten station wall. Now, it was a warning. "You don't win a war like this with momentum," he said finally. "You win it with clarity." Brant frowned. "Meaning?" "People follow us now because we're loud, because we hit back. But soon they're going to want more than revenge. They're going to want leadership, stability. A path. You mean politics," Cora muttered, clearly unimpressed. Rhodes nodded. "And someone's going to try and twist this into exactly what we fought against." "You think Earth will install a puppet leader?" Brant asked. Rhodes shook his head. "Worse, I think someone on our side will." That was the problem with rebellion. It always created the next tyrant, waiting for their turn to wear a better mask. He was proven right 3 days later. The fleet was docked in low orbit around Foros Station, a neutral civilian trade node that had quietly aligned with Helix forces. Rhodes was reviewing new intelligence when Cora barged in with a glare that could melt steel. "We've got a problem," she said. Rhodes didn't flinch. "Another blockade?" "Worse. One of ours just declared a new command authority." He looked up sharply. "Who?" "Colonel Maris. Used to run Logistics Sector 8. Had a small detachment during the Mars riots. Says Helix leadership is compromised and that we've strayed from the original vision of human sovereignty." Rhodes stood immediately, despite the flare of pain in his leg. "He declared this publicly?" "Posted it across Helix relay bands. Claims you've become a cult leader. That your methods threaten any chance of diplomacy." Brant joined them a minute later, datapad in hand. "He's got a fleet of 8 ships, 2 of them military grade. I ran the signatures. They were stolen from the UEC's pullback zones." "Does he have support?" Rhodes asked. "Small pockets, disillusioned officers, political holdouts who want to negotiate from strength with the Zorions." "He's trying to sanitize the war," Rhodes muttered. "Use our blood to buy his own seat at the table." Cora's voice darkened. "What do we do?" Rhodes didn't hesitate. "We cut him out before he poisons the core." The confrontation happened near the Naris belt, an asteroid cluster where Maris's fleet had anchored to begin spreading his unified directive. Rhodes brought 3 ships, not a show of strength, just enough to make the point clear. They hailed Maris directly. His face appeared on the view screen, older, stern, crisp uniform that still bore the old Earth insignia. "Captain Rhodes," he said smoothly, "I'm surprised you came in person." "Had to make sure I wasn't imagining things," Rhodes said. "You really wearing that uniform while spitting in every grave this rebellion's dug?" "I'm offering order," Maris replied. "We've made our point. Earth is ready to negotiate and the Zorians are listening. You keep pushing. We lose everything." "No," Rhodes snapped. "We lose when people like you start rewriting history in real time. You weren't there when they shut down the Vanguard. You didn't watch your people suffocate because some alien diplomat decided humanity needed a lesson in obedience. I read the reports, Maris said, and that's the difference between us. There was silence between them, one built not on respect, but contempt. Then Maris said it. Step down, publicly, hand over Helix Command and let the rest of us salvage what we can. Brant inhaled sharply. Rhodes just stared at him, unblinking. You want my position? He said coldly. Come and take it. Then he cut the feed. The first shot came from Maris's side. Standard magnetic artillery, but aimed wide, like a warning. Rhodes didn't return fire. Not yet. Instead, he broadcast across every Helix channel. Colonel Maris has abandoned our cause. He would trade our dead for a handshake and a seat at a poisoned table. Let this be a reminder. This rebellion is not a ladder. It's not a brand. It's a promise. And promises bought with blood don't get broken. Then he ordered the counterstrike. Cora led the assault, flanking Maris's ships with 2 cloaked skirmishers. Brant launched a barrage of disruptor mines into the asteroid field, forcing Maris's fleet to break formation. Within 10 minutes, 2 of his ships were disabled, and a third was burning. Rhodes hailed him one last time. Maris, surrender. You get no martyr's death. But the colonel never answered. His ship detonated mid-transmission, taking him and 3 officers with it. The message was clear. There would be no mercy for traitors. After the dust settled, Rhodes returned to Helix Station, where Cora found him standing in the observation deck, staring down at Earth again. They're calling it the Helix Schism, she said. Good name, Rhodes muttered. Sounds almost poetic. They'll say you're out of control, that you turned on your own. I did turn on my own, because they stopped being what we fought for. Cora looked tired. What now? Rhodes didn't answer right away. Then he looked over his shoulder. We build what comes next. Not a government, not a replacement system. Something new, something human. You think people are ready for that? No, Rhodes said. But they weren't ready for a broken ship to kill a planet either. She didn't argue, because deep down they both knew what had started couldn't be stopped anymore. The question wasn't who would win. It was who would survive long enough to decide what came next. The war didn't end with a bang. It ended in silence, just as it began. But this silence was earned, not imposed. It began when the Zorians blinked. They didn't send fleets, they didn't issue threats. For the first time since humanity crawled into the stars and tried to sit at the table of empires, the Zorians sent one thing, a message, a single data packet, transmitted across all Helix-linked systems. Rhodes stood in the central chamber of Helix Station, surrounded by his commanders, Cora, Brant, Calder, and dozens of others who had bled for the right to even be there. The packet was playing on loop, translated from layered Zorian thought patterns into crude human speech. You have made your species known. We respect survival. We will reevaluate your status. The sanctions end. Your territories are yours. We will not engage further, unless invited. The message was short. No apology, no emotion, just a statement of fact. Rhodes didn't cheer. Neither did anyone else. They all just stood there, absorbing what had just happened. After a long moment, Brant whispered, We won. Cora replied without turning. Number we outlasted them. And that was the truth. They hadn't won because they overpowered the Zorians. They hadn't outmatched their fleets or out-engineered their weapons. They'd simply refused to die. Rhodes turned off the screen and faced the room. It's over. The room remained quiet. Some of the rebels looked relieved. Others looked lost, like soldiers waking from a long fever dream, unsure of what peace meant anymore. Calder cleared his throat. So, what now? Do we go back? Back. The word hit like a punch. Back to Earth? Back to governments that betrayed them? Back to a system that would rather bury the truth than confront it? No, Rhodes said. We don't go back. We move forward. He walked to the central table, where a new star map had been etched into the steel. Sectors claimed, territories held, colonies freed, and systems left untouched, waiting. This rebellion wasn't about power, he continued. It wasn't about trading one master for another. It was about reclaiming choice. So that's what we give people now. Choice. Brant nodded slowly. No central command, no ruler, just systems that decide their own future. And a unified defense, Cora added, because someone's always watching the fire, waiting to snuff it out. Calder exhaled. You're building a new kind of civilization. No, Rhodes corrected. We're building a community. Call it what you want. Helix, Vanguard, I don't care. But it won't be Earth. It won't be Zorion. It'll be ours. The others stared at him. He could see it in their eyes, hope and fear in equal measure. They had fought so long, so hard, it was almost easier to stay at war. Peace demanded something far more difficult, responsibility. Rhodes looked to Cora. You still in? She cracked a rare smile. Until my bones turn to dust. To Brant. Try getting rid of me, he replied. To Calder. We've already come too far. Rhodes stepped back. Then let's finish what we started. The next 3 months were chaos, not destruction, construction. Colonies that had declared independence under the Helix banner began working together to form a unified framework. Trade networks, shared defense signals, medical fleets, refugee transports. The core team called it the Fire Net, a living, growing organism of rebellion that had now become a lifeline for 100 struggling systems. Earth didn't interfere. It couldn't. Its governments were fractured, its alliances threadbare. And with Zorion embargoes lifted, its population turned inward, asking questions they didn't want answers to. The old power structure remained, but it limped now. Hollow, nervous, watching. And Rhodes? He disappeared from public view. No interviews, no declarations, no parades. He wasn't interested in becoming an idol. He left that to the historians. Instead, he returned to the Vanguard, or what was left of it. The twisted hull had been salvaged and docked at a new station orbiting a red dwarf near the Fringe Worlds, a place that had become something sacred. A tomb, a shrine, a reminder. Rhodes visited it alone. He limped down the reconstructed corridors, burned, welded, repaired in places but still jagged in others. He passed the names carved into the walls, hand-etched by the survivors. Every crew member lost, every sacrifice logged by memory and grief. He stood in what used to be the command deck, the chair where he first watched the ship die. The walls still bore scorch marks. A piece of twisted railing still jutted from the floor where Torres had fallen. He sat. Not to command. Just to be. It was quiet now. Not the silence of a system shut down. The silence of peace. He stayed for hours. When he returned to Helix Prime, Cora was waiting for him. She handed him a bottle of Earth whiskey. Real, not synthesized. A gift from some grateful trader who'd smuggled it out of old Chicago. They sat on the observation deck together, drinking in silence, watching the stars. You think this lasts? She asked. Rhodes took a sip. I don't know. Think they'll try again? He shrugged. Maybe. Will you be ready? He looked at her. Are you? She smiled faintly. I wasn't supposed to live this long, but yeah, I think I am. Another long silence. Then she asked the one question no one else dared to. Do you regret it? Rhodes didn't answer immediately. He thought about the Vanguard, About the warhead, about the thousands who died, the governments that betrayed him, the Zarians who watched and waited, and the fire they started that never quite went out. He took a long breath. "No," he said. "I regret not doing it sooner." Cora nodded, and the stars spun on, unbothered, unbroken, just watching, as they always did,